Okay, so belong to a Facebook group called eBody Mopars, which is an awesome resource for help and pictures when you're stuck. So I had some guys that were interested in how this install turned out. So I wanted to do a little video. This will probably take 10 minutes to explain what this American Autowire kit does and doesn't do. It is a better setup than the OEM wiring harness by far, but it has its limitations. American Autowire, I get the impression, focuses on Chevys, not so much Mopars. But they do build a good harness. So when you go to buy this, you read, and it's like, oh yeah, it goes all the way through. This will replace everything, support your, stock stuff. Whoa! And then you get the box and you open this up and read it, and it says, this kit typically should be used on a modified application only. It doesn't contain nor will it support some of the more obscure factory options, such as overhead reading or map lamp, time delay relay overhead console, or door jar lighting. And then it goes on to talk about, here's the part that kind of really defeated me for a minute. It says, will not support the use of any factory installed AC setup. However, this kit will support the use of and does contain all the necessary wiring for a factory heater system. Well, that's kind of a... that's what you call a Joe Biden lie right there. So I've got this hooked up just to test what I did with the heater AC wiring, and that's what this video is really about, is how you wire that when this kit is not set up to do that. So as you see, I got this wire that runs around here and plugs into the heater motor. So on a Mopar, your blower motor is out in the engine bay compartment. And American Autowire says it supports a factory heater. No, it doesn't. Because there's no wire in this harness and down to the bulkhead to plug in and go to the blower motor. And they said, well, we don't think Mopar did it that way anyway. There's a hole in your firewall. That's where you run the wire. And I'm like, no. I disassembled my own harness, my old harness, and the green wire for the heater is in there, and the blue wire for the AC clutch is in there. So that stuff all comes out of the bulkhead and then goes across to the heater and to the AC. So since this system is set up for some modified accessories, this system is set up to work with an aftermarket gauge system. So if you've got electric tach, electric speedometer, electric everything, this system is set up for that. It has a pigtail right here, and you plug into it and all the wires to do that. Mine's a rally gauge, so I use their connectors and the wiring for that, which is not difficult. You are going to need to buy those two special pliers right there. I bought it from American Autowire. It was $160 for the both of them. Yeah, they get you coming on restoration stuff. Anyway, so inside of here are these two wires, the yellow and the purple. They're twisted together. And that is, I believe, for your electric speedo. And so what I did is I unplugged it out of this plug-in. And in order to do that, there's some cool little tools you're going to need. Let me show you those. You're going to need these cool little things. These are made to remove electrical connectors. And I don't know, I found this on an ad on Instagram. Made in China stuff, cheap, but it works, and it works well. So I unplugged that wire, those two wires out of this connector, and then I crimped it in to my green wire, which comes from the resistor, and that is the power supply around to the blower motor. So these two wires come down through the main harness, and I've put this back together But basically this wire right here that's plugged in is those two wires. And so they came down here and they both went into separate sockets. You can see I got an empty hole now. So I pulled the connectors out, I cut them off, I got a new one, connected both wires together. You're saying, why did you do both? Well, because I wanted enough capacity in the wiring, and you know, those two wires are probably 18 gauge. And so I figured if I stuck them together, I would have good voltage to the blower motor. American Autowire recommends a 12 gauge wire to supply the heater. Even though Mopar never used a wire that size, they use 16 and 18 gauge wire. Anyway, so I plugged it in there, and then when I do the firewall bulkhead adapters that plug into there, I will plug the wire in for that, a green 12 gauge. So now there's one other wire that I had to add, and that's this blue wire right here, and that's to run the AC clutch. And so I opened the harness up, slipped that one in there, and he plugs in right there. No? There, that one that's kind of crooked. Anyway, that was an empty hole. So if you're going to do all this, the first thing you need is a good wiring diagram. And I got this from classiccarwiring.com. I actually bought this from, I believe, Classic Industries. So originally, Mopar pulled voltage off all over the place. So you go over here to the fuse box. You come up here, and this plugs into a black wire, which goes over to the 6-button AC switch. So on mine, that's this center wire, which is now a brown one, because the American Autowire system comes with 12 gauge feed wire for the blower motor switch, and then it pigtails one off that comes up around here, and this is for your AC setup. And then what you have to do is you also have to piggyback this light tan one off of the power and around into this side. And then this light tan wire goes up through the harness and comes around to your resistor in your heater. And that's this one. That's the power supply for that to make it work. And then here's your connector. You've got a dark brown, a light green, and a dark green in there. Actually, you got two dark greens. One of them comes from this blower motor switch, and then the other one just comes out here as a standalone wire, goes around, and that's the one that's going to run the blower motor. That's the one that I've tied into these wires. So the other thing that they did is originally the power supply for this, which is your AC. So when you turn on the AC, there's power here, and it sends it here out the blue wire to the clutch. Originally, what they did is they brought it off of this small connector. It comes off the fuse box here. Is this light tan wire comes down to this little connector, which takes bullet connectors. And that light green wire plugged into this bullet connector, then went up here to the switches. So between 70 and 74, Chrysler and Plymouth made 5 different variations of the heater AC wiring diagram. So these guys said it'd like double the cost of the harness to make all of those, and they're all proprietary, he said. Anyway, so this is how you work around it. You need just some wiring skills. I just went, well, there's a 30 amp fuse in the system for the heater AC. So that's why I have kept all the electrical comes out of this big 12 gauge feed wire, because I want everything to run off that one fuse. And the way it was wired originally, Mopar took it off of all kinds of places, which looks like a big headache. So the other thing that I'll tell you is if you have power windows, it's got the connector for that. You got a CUDA with fog lights. There's your fog lights connector. It comes with a dimmer switch. Here's the connector that's going to go back for the tail lights. Here's your park brake wire. And then I believe this is going to be a pigtail for the courtesy light when you open the door. I'm not sure. Anyway, it's a pretty simple system. If I can do it, you can do it. But like I say, this system is set up to run an aftermarket heater AC system like vintage air. So I don't know where the blower motor is on one of those, if it's outside or inside, or if they ran the wire inside. But if you need to go out onto the firewall like I do to get to my plug-in, you are going to have to add a wire, because there is an open hole right here that you could plug into. You would only need that if you're using the aftermarket loom for your speedo tack and all your other gauges. You couldn't do what I did down here by taking those out, but you do have one connector that's open. So anyway, I've tested it. All the functions run. When you push AC, it sends juice out the blue wire on AC, max AC, and defrost, which is how it's supposed to work. All in all, this was a really good system. Like I said, I've kicked its ass. I've figured it out, bypassed all the problems. So I think the dash harness is going to be your biggest hurdle. After that, everything is all pretty simple. It's just, there's nothing to it. Now, this system is going to support electronic EFI. I've got a MSD box, ignition box, that'll go in my glove box over there, and it'll support all that. So it's good all the way around if you want to update and you want to be able to run more power to stuff. Now that is one of the drawbacks. Is so there's my amp meter terminals in there, and this is not made to hook up to your factory amp meter, because that amp meter was only designed to run like 40 or 60 amps. That's it. And if you've got an alternator that's putting out over 100 amps, I've got a one-wire alternator, and that's what this system is designed to support, as a one-wire connection. I don't think it'll do the old Chrysler alternator and regulator box. I'm not sure. But anyway, that's the problem with it. You'll have to get a volt gauge. You know, if you do a trio of gauges underneath the dash, your oil pressure, water temp, and you could have a volt gauge. But you're not going to get your amp meter to work in the factory gauges with this setup, because they said, because this is a modified system and it runs relays for the low beam, high beam, and fog lights, so that if you want to run some super high powered lights, it'll do that without melting the wires. And so your amp meter connection on your old deal down here is your weak link, and that's where you could have a fire. So they don't support that. Okay, doing a little testaroo on my setup here. So I've got my heater AC there. I've got the motor plugged in. I'm using a battery charger. I got the ground lead on this, and the ground for the motor over there. As you can hear, the motor is running on low because I've got the switch all the way over here. There's medium, and there's high. Okay, so I got blower fan on high, medium, and then on low it's continually running. Just super slow. So with the switch clear over in this position, and the heater AC off, I still have voltage running through this switch. So one can only assume that the only way to kill that blower motor from running completely is when you turn the key off. No juice, no run. Because I know back in the 70s they came up with that idea, if you run the blower motor a little bit, that's just to keep you from asphyxiating yourself when you're making out in the back seat of the car. I don't know. I haven't figured this one out yet. So this is how you hook up the vacuum hoses on an e-body. So you can't buy the pigtail anymore for these. It should look like this with this rubber end on it that goes over all the little nipples there. So this one's for a B-body, and I bought it on eBay thinking I could take this off and use it. No, you can't. They're not coming out. And you really don't need it anyway, because these little hoses will go right on here. They'll hook right up, fit tight, so you can live without that deal. But you are going to need the hoses, and I wanted hoses that were color coded, had different stripes in them. So all I could find in that kind of a deal, and I looked and looked, was through this company down there in Texas called Air Manufacturing Corporation, AutoACSolutions.com. Anyway, there was, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 hoses in there. 6 of them were colored. 1 of them was black. And I got soaked pretty good. Yes, I did. It cost me, with shipping, $62. Anyway, I think each one of these is like 6 feet long. So basically what I did is, this actuator here is your fresh air or recirculation door. So I have hooked the one with the orange tracer into the bottom of it. And then this other one, I believe, has a blue tracer in it. And so what I did is I just hooked these in there. And I've just come over here onto this paper. This is a PDF that I found online. If you need a copy of this, you can just Google it. E-body Mopar heater AC vacuum lines. Some of the Mopar groups on the internet have this in a PDF form you can download. If you can't find it, I could get it to you through your email. You just have to give me your email. Anyway, so basically it goes through here and it shows them using a white hose and a red hose and a yellow and a white and a white and a red. Anyway, they used a lot of white, and so it's like, how are you supposed to tell where that goes if you don't have that connector on the hose? If it's not a factory setup, how are you going to tell? So what I did is I went in, and I got lucky on this one. I actually had a white one and a red one for this one. But my recirculation door is a blue and an orange. And my defroster's purple. And my bypass actuator is green. So I just wrote that on the paper. So after I get this thing all in there and I hook these up to the control, I can get them where they want to be. Now, in this PDF, it shows the switch as having 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then number 4 is sealed off. But with the switch installed in the car, it's backwards. You got 4 on the top and 3 on the bottom. So what I did is, through my detective sucking abilities, I put the hose on there and sucked on it. Anyway, I have figured out where these go. So this is the order. these numbers correspond with these numbers here, but this is how it's going to look when you're looking at it with the switch installed. So it's going to go with the 3 on the bottom, it's going to go 7, 6, 5, and then on the top 4, 3, 2, 1. So irregardless of whatever this Mopar thing says, if you've got hoses like I bought with the different colored tracers, just write on the PDF what color they are, and then follow this schematic here. So number 6 is going to be your black vacuum line, and that's going to be the center one on the bottom row of 3. And then your bypass actuator is number 5, which is right next to number 6. And then you've got number 7, which is the red one, down here to the heating air conditioning actuator. So 7 goes right next to that. And then you've got 1, which is on the fresh door. That's the red one. And that's going to go to number 1 up here. And then we've got 2, which was the purple wire to the defroster actuator. That's this one, number 2 here. And anyway, so that's all you got to do. The other thing you got to remember is that your white line, the one that comes off your air conditioning actuator, this one, it's got a white stripe in it, comes around, and when it comes to this deal right here, which is the bypass actuator, and that's got the green stripe on it, what you do is bring it up here and you put a T in the line and hook it in here. Anyway, it shows that T connection right there. And then it also shows a restrictor right here. And I don't have that. Don't know if I'm going to put that in. It says the restrictor is installed in the vacuum hose leading to the AC door actuator. This restrictor provides some delay in the opening of the AC door after the heat or defrost button is depressed. This delay gives the blower time to expel condensation from the evaporator housing through the AC outlets before it can be blown onto the windshield. So I don't know why you're going to be running the AC and then go to defrost. I got no idea. Anyway, so I probably won't get that one in there. The other one that you got to have in there in your vacuum line is a check valve / filter. And somewhere through the firewall, I've got to get that hose through there. I haven't figured that out yet. But basically, that's how you set one up if you haven't got a clue where the hoses go. Thank goodness I found this deal, and then I found these colored lines, so I can go ahead and put the unit in and then get my dash in and be able to plug the hoses in because I know where they go. I know what colors go where. Beep, beep.